Very warm welcome to those who are in attendance. This is our first session of the Adapting During Crisis series. Just to quickly introduce myself, so I'm Stephanie, I am the Community Engagement Manager at Bruntwood Sci-Tech Birmingham. So back in January, as we all sat watching the news, it was difficult to see ourselves in the position that we find ourselves today. In a short period of time, we've all had to adapt in very new ways of living and new ways of thinking and indeed new ways of working. While unfortunately COVID-19 has hit a lot of businesses hard, many science and technology businesses working in fields such as diagnostics, vaccinations, online video conferences, data centres and cybersecurity have all seen a demand and usage grow. I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by a few of those companies, and over the next 40 minutes or so, we will be sharing their experiences with you in a hope to inspire, share advice and provide tips and tools for you to take away. In a very short moment, I'll be handing over to my colleague Jamie to give us some themes of how coronavirus is impacting us all. We'll then hear from Daniel Kremin, founding director of Civico Live, based at Innovation Birmingham campus. We'll then hear from Hayden Jeffries, Chief Operating Officer of Yourgene Health, based at City Labs, Manchester Science Park. We're then going to open up to Q&A and discussion. So you'll all have a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Please do type any questions you have into there as we go along. But if you prefer to ask your question verbally, when it gets to the point, you can raise your virtual hand and we'll unmute you and we'll be able to ask away. Now, one final thing before I hand over to Jamie, there should also be a poll option at the bottom of the screen. If I could ask you to complete this, it will help us shape our discussion at the end. Right, okay, I'm sure you'll all be glad to hear that that's everything from me. I'm going to pass over to Jamie Clyde, Innovation Services Director for Bruntwood Sci-Tech.
Thanks, Steph. I'd just like to add to Steph's welcome by saying that we're really grateful that you've joined us this afternoon. There are so many online events happening as we speak, and we really appreciate your company. I hope you find this session informative and entertaining. And please do participate, as Steph says, by posing your questions. The more interactive, the better. So this new series of events aims to promote businesses in the SciTech community, which spans now Innovation Birmingham, MSP, City Labs and Circle Square in Manchester, Audley Park and Platform in Leeds. And as well as hearing good news, we'd like this to be an opportunity to share learnings on how businesses have overcome the challenges, as Steph has said. While it's far from certain when we'll all emerge from this crisis, there's very little debate that the world will have changed as a result of it, and we're seeing a number of themes starting to emerge. The first of these is deglobalization, with supply chains moving closer to developed markets, and this will affect traditional manufacturing in emerging economies, and at the same time benefiting technologies that promote localized manufacturing, such as robotics, smart manufacturing, and 3D. The second theme is around decarbonization, which has become even more apparent, the research that shows the link between carbon-based pollution and infectious disease. So the COVID-19 pandemic will create even more urgency for clean energy, electric vehicles, and the renewal of our grid. E-commerce has been boosted with the forced closure of 94% of retail stores in the crisis, and with Amazon hiring over 100,000 extra staff in response to demand. Before the crisis, only 19% of commerce was online, so there's undoubtedly great opportunities for further growth in e-commerce software, as well as local logistics and food delivery operators. There'll be a major realignment of healthcare systems following the crisis, with a greater focus on diagnostics and digital healthcare, and a changing role for GPs and primary healthcare. The government's new testing strategy points to the creation of a diagnostics industry in the UK, intended to help us not just in the solving COVID-19, but to address disease threats in the future. And finally, digital transformation. As the crisis has forced many of us to work from home, many more of us to work from home, we will be debating in coming weeks just how many of these new working practices are in fact more efficient and therefore should remain after the lockdown. And this will inevitably create more opportunities for digital tech and cloud-based technologies. And the advertising sector, on the other hand, is already proving to be a casualty with a 15% fall in revenues. So in the past few weeks, businesses across our campuses have fought to stabilize operations and adopt new ways of working. Many have embraced new opportunities and actively helping to overcome the virus's threats both to our health and our economy. At Park, biotech businesses are carrying on with work as normal as they need lab space and facilities to support social distance without turning work supporting big pharma companies on COVID-19. And the Medicines Discovery Catapult at Audley Park is working around the clock to open up one of the new laboratories, which forms part of Matt Hancock's 5-pillar COVID-19 testing strategy. In Manchester, the diagnostics sector and life sciences is also involved with COVID-19 testing, both antigen and antibody testing, which we've heard a lot about in the news in the last few days, as well as work on vaccines to protect against the virus in the future. And these include ImmunoDX, QIAGEN, and Yourgene. Tech businesses in Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds, video conferencing and cybersecurity, and they've all seen demand and usage grow. For example, in Leeds and Manchester, based North Coders, have launched a new 8-week full-time course to teach people how to code from home. Data center provider IMART is part of an open source computing project called Folding at Home to help researchers search for a new drug to stop the virus. And Altinet in Leeds has had a surge in demand supporting new and existing customers with remote working and cybersecurity. Dicey Tech in Manchester is now 3D printing shields for NHS PPE. And Civico, as we'll hear shortly in Birmingham, is helping local authorities to continue to operate during the lockdown with specialist webcasting. So we're very grateful to have 2 of these companies with us here today. The first is Daniel Kremen, as I just mentioned, the founder and the managing director of Civico, based in SciTech's Innovation Birmingham campus. Daniel's a pioneer in the field of online broadcasting, and from a background in local regeneration, broadcasting for councils and public-facing organisations. It delivers live streaming from local council chambers to neighbourhood forums and enabling citizens to watch at home and actively share the stage to give us greater access to council business and leading to more transparent policy decisions. So Daniel, as a leader in webcasting, responded to the challenges over the past few weeks as whole sections of business, public sector and society more widely have been forced to embrace your technology. Daniel.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so Civico, what we generally do is we provide not necessarily just webcasting, it's more conference control, and webcasting is one of the effects. So issues that councils have in the current crisis is that if there's a planning application or a licensing meeting, the decisions made at a council meeting are only validated and legal if members of the public are in attendance. So the council have had to very quickly come up with new ways to define what constitutes attendance from the public. New legislation was pushed through last week to allow councils to now hold their meetings remotely and then to live stream that. So if a member of the public is capturing that through a live stream, they are then in attendance and the decisions made at those meetings are then legal and validated. So that's the sort of thing that we do. But just to go back a little bit, one of the things that I thought would be useful to say in this forum was, as a company, and yes, we're a tech company, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the organization is tech orientated. There are obviously salespeople and various other people who are not overly familiar with coding, for example. And then how do you get that operation out of iCentrum and all start working from home, even though hopefully it's for a very short period? So things like planning for that, we had to plan for that nice and early. So everybody got the right equipment, and you'll have noticed that the price of laptops went up very dramatically in the week before most people left their offices. So we literally had to go and buy a suite of dedicated laptops, which would allow people to very quickly load up all the software they needed and to work remotely. And we're fortunate that we're actually able to do that. But that was quite a logistical challenge. And then the changes of work patterns. So using, we use the agile method. So using Slack every morning at 10 o'clock for our team meeting to go through what have they worked on, what are they going to work on, what issues have they got, and to use that platform along with Zoom, was the platform we were using, because it does a particular thing. And just changing our work patterns. And one of the things I've realized is individuals who behave a certain way in the office don't necessarily behave the same way when they're working remotely. You know, some people need much more physical contact rather than just trying to deal with things over text and Slack, etc. So that's the issue of how we as a company have adopted and adapted rather to remote working. And I have to say, for us, it's actually very successful. And I suspect our working patterns will not be the same. And I would imagine that's the same for a lot of people. Then councils, more importantly, have gone through a massive curve. They've suddenly literally been asked to leave their own buildings where they operate from. And they're running around trying to create new ways. So they've all jumped onto Teams and Zoom. And of course, those popular platforms were designed for a particular thing. And so what's come out of that is, you know, Zoom and Teams do not know about the laws of governance and what are the peculiarities about making sure you've got the right documents, and how do you access restricted documents? How do you, I don't know, take a vote, a meaningful vote, as if you were in the council chamber. So we fortunately had been working on an application for a number of years, which will allow councils to join together with just using software. And now we've come forward with a remote attendance application, which is allowing councils to carry on business, such as licensing meetings and planning meetings and even full cabinet meetings, and which proportions of those meetings are going to be automatically live streamed and which are for private consumption. So for us as a company, we've realized there are huge opportunities opening up for us, and I could not have designed a better marketing tool. I literally, you know, you just couldn't have invented it. So we have an opportunity. I mean, sad that it is coming around this way, but it's there. And there are opportunities that we've had to turn down. So invitations to do live streaming of funerals and cremations, for example. Although there is a need out there, we realized that there are other popular platforms which can deal with that, and we didn't need to get distracted, and it would have been a distraction. And so there are lots of other things that need to be live streamed that we're not looking to do. But I see that actually for companies like us, providing we're able to work smarter ourselves and we don't get caught in the panic. So some people, for example, are concerned that they want to go back to the old way of working, and they're trying to make new tools do what they used to do, when what they're not really perhaps grasping is they're going to need to change their working practice. I could say more, but I guess I would rather prefer if people would just make some questions, and I'll happily have a go at answering those either now or through the live chat or the Q&A. I can't hear you right now, Jamie.
Great, sorry, thank you, Daniel. Yes, I'd say we'll open the floor up in just a second. I'd like to introduce and bring in our second guest first. Hayden Jeffries is the Chief Operating Officer of Yourgene, based in City Labs in Manchester. And Yourgene Health is an international molecular diagnostic group which provides and commercializes genetic products and services. The group works in partnership with global leaders in DNA technology to advance diagnostic service. And last week, they formally announced a new agreement with Novacyt to manufacture a COVID-19 diagnostic test. Hayden has over 20 years experience in clinical diagnostics, and before joining Yourgene last year, he was CEO at Cambridge Epigenetics. He has a genetics background and a wealth of experience in leading business transformation. So Hayden, it'd be great if you could just share with us a bit about the journey that you company have been through over just the last couple of weeks. Your business has stepped up to the huge challenge of playing a key role in tackling the coronavirus crisis. Hayden.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Stephanie, for inviting me on to speak. And hopefully the bandwidth is good enough for the audience to hear. And Daniel, thank you for giving us the oversight from Civico and how you've tackled the challenges of this, and how technology that you guys are deploying is being used, and how you're transforming the way that local councils work. As Jamie said, we're an international molecular diagnostic company, and it's interesting to be on the same platform as Civico because it gives us an opportunity to compare two very different businesses. We are very much an international business serving companies and customers in over 60 countries around the world. And ourselves, we have 3 hubs, one in Manchester, one in Singapore, and one in Taipei. And each one of those hubs has different challenges as this crisis unfolds. And we've been able to track it and prepare for this as it hit the UK, because we had some early warning through both Taiwan and Singapore. Clearly, our top priority is going to be the safety and support of all our staff around the world. And we had to make some important decisions and some important choices about how we do that. We did a lot of preparing and a lot of planning for this. And so one of the things that we looked at is establishing a cross-functional team, which we called COBRA, very much named after the government's approach, where you bring together key individuals from very important functions within the business to ensure that we plan for as many of the eventualities that we could foresee. And we did this and it was very successful. And we continue to update our staff very regularly through a variety of media, through emails. Our CEO, Lynn Rees, puts out a weekly video to the team so they can hear what he's saying. In the weeks prior to the lockdown, we started to plan for a fire drill to see the effectiveness of working from home for those members of our teams that could do that. And that really started in earnest the Friday of the week prior to the actual lockdown imposed by the government. And that enabled us to get ahead of the curve a little bit in that sense. We also did a lot of risk assessment and looked at mitigating plans. How do we have stock? How do we prepare for staff being unwell? What is our approach to those sorts of things? And that enabled us to be in a very strong position. And we are luckily enough to be able to run 2 laboratories, one here in Manchester in the UK and the other in Taipei, so they can act as backup facilities for each other. We implemented social distancing where it was applicable and where it was practical. And by that I mean within the office space itself, we asked team members to sit at least 2 meters apart. We ensured that there's cleanliness routines put in, wiping down handles, etc. We ensured that we had the correct PPE within the laboratories and within the office where it was required. And then, as I said, we moved staff who could work from home to home. And very much like Daniel was saying, we saw a certain adaption of technology and trying to work through the different platforms that we have available to us. And without wishing to be an advert for Microsoft, I have to say Microsoft Teams is an incredible innovation and has made a real difference to our working environment when we're working from home. We also did things like look at split shift with our service lab and operational personnel, so that if one of those team members became ill, it didn't knock out our entire workforce. And taking things like that and being able to implement them ahead of time was very important. Something else that we did, we initiated cross-training programs across all functions, so that if we did lose somebody, we had a way of filling that back in so we could keep the continuity of supply. And what's really important to remember, our routine business is about supporting NHS and global healthcare networks. We supply into those networks NIPT testing, we look at pregnancy loss, the confirmatory test for the NIPT, and we are one of the leaders in supplying cystic fibrosis testing into the European markets. And that is a group of patients who are at particular risk. So identifying those patients and making sure that those tests continue to be supplied to laboratories is very important. And with our customers, we've really focused on communication and support. We've moved from face-to-face meetings into virtual meetings, keeping our sales team in contact with those customers to support their needs, understand how they need to adapt their ordering patterns, etc. We've written to all our customers to say that our service laboratories in Taiwan and Manchester can support their work if they become overwhelmed through illness themselves and within the laboratory staff, or that they have to be diverted to COVID testing. So continuing to be that really first line of support and a very good partner for those labs. We've moved our technical support team. We have a very challenging and environment in which we work. There's a lot of lab work, a lot of people traveling. We've reduced that travel down so that the tech support guys can do that remotely, and they've really adapted that process, and it's been very successful. And we also ensured that there was an availability of key raw materials for our products, so that if supply lines became compromised for any period of time, that we were able to continue producing and manufacturing those tests that we have. And Stephanie, if you can move on to the next slide. And in terms of adapting through this crisis, I think we were very well prepared. Because we're a global organization, we were able to see what has happened in other countries. We were tracking it as it certainly broke in China and then started to travel into Europe, and we saw Italy have the problems that they have. So we got ourselves ahead of the government advice. So when it came to the time when the government asked people to work from home, our teams were already set up there. We'd already engaged our IT support network. We'd had the laptops we needed. So that really was very important. Our teams are incredibly agile and flexible and very adaptable. And that's the key. We have a very engaged workforce who are prepared to work with us and go through some of the bumps that we would have, as I'm sure everybody would imagine. And I think in a growing company, it certainly highlighted where we had some really solid processes, where things worked really well. And as you'd imagine, there would be other processes that could be improved, and we're learning all the time from that. And for me, communication is key. We really adapted very quickly to virtual meetings and virtual presence. I would say anybody who's going through this, keeping in touch with your staff, you can't do it enough. You've got to have those calls. We do virtual hangouts, virtual coffee mornings. I speak to my team, and they speak to within their teams as well every day. We ensure that nobody's left isolated, that they have plenty of contact through Teams and through Zoom and emails and phone calls, because that's really important. That you have people who are now working on their own and living on their own, and so you have to be there to support them. We've moved very quickly from where somebody might be spending 8 or 10 hours a day in work to having all that extra time at home on their own. So we have to keep that social element going, because it's so important what we do. The other thing that we've done is been really flexible around childcare. 30% of our team have children of school age. I have 2 teenagers, and I think they're rather glad I'm in work rather than at home, and trying to talk to them. But we've adapted our working days so that some of our team get up very early. They may get up at 6 or so and work for 3 hours prior to their young children getting up, and then do a more broken up day during the sort of time the children are awake, and then work late into the evening. And we know that we have to adapt to that in order to get what we need out of the staff and get the best out of them. And by being supportive, we've seen a huge amount of goodwill created. As I talked about, our social huddle is very important. Those of you who have heard Lynn Rees, our CEO, speak, he will have talked about our social huddle and how the culture of our business is really important. And they've really driven some of those digital hangouts. We have Friday night gin o'clock, which is a wonderful thing to do. And we have really tried to push to make sure people are engaged. We've done a lot of cross-training, and that was really important that we got our key functions supported. So, for example, we have cross-training in cross-logistics, in production, in customer service, in finance, so that if we lose a member of team because of the virus, it really helps ensure that we can keep supplying those products into those markets where they desperately need them. It has forced everyone to be more tech savvy. We have a very broad range of ages within our business, and some of them are less familiar with the technology approaches, and I would put myself in that group. And this has really made us work in a much more digital friendly way. As I've said earlier, the Microsoft Teams has been a revelation for us. And I think when we come back to work, we'll and have people back in the office, it'll be something that we'll continue to use and engage with. And Stephanie, if I can take you on to the last slide. And here, this is again an important part of what we do. We are a global diagnostic company. We have an incredible expertise in both development and manufacture of molecular diagnostic tests. And we recognize the unprecedented demand for testing and both for manufacturing and the testing itself. And we're uniquely positioned in being able to be a manufacturer and also a testing facility ourselves. And what we're doing is we're preparing our laboratories to take on that testing as it's rolled out through the country. We're also supporting manufacturing. And there's, in the introduction, and people may know, that we signed a manufacturing contract with another UK-based company to manufacture some components for the COVID-19 test in our facility here. We are incredibly well positioned to do that. We have a state-of-the-art facility. We're able to switch our capacity to support that. And we felt as an organization and as an executive team, it was really very important that we were able to do that, support the national effort in testing, and also support the NHS. And we're here very closely located to some hospitals and the Northwest Public Health, and we will be looking to take on testing there to support them as the amount of testing that needs to be done is ramped up. And part of what we're able to do in that manufacturing is utilize our expertise in automation to scale up production. The amount of testing that is required globally is just phenomenal. And we are certainly in a position to deploy all our resources and make the most of this opportunity to really bring up a high scale production of those sorts of tests. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
Right. Thank you, Hayden. What we would like to do is, as I said right at the beginning, is to get as many questions as possible. I see they're starting to come in, and I'm hoping that Steph can support me in this, and we can address these questions as they come in. Let me just kick off though. And obviously both organizations, you've been given all sorts of new opportunities through the crisis. Interested to find out how you prioritize these opportunities. I think, Daniel, you mentioned you looked at funerals and all sorts of other things that came your way. Be interesting to see what criteria you used to sift through the opportunities that came in and focused on the ones that were relevant to your business and as you say, don't ignore the other ones. Perhaps Hayden, if you, or Daniel, do you want to answer that one first, and then we'll come back to Hayden? Daniel, I'm afraid you're still on mute, I think.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Can you hear me?
Perfect.
I can hear you loud and clear.
So we obviously have our 3-5-year plan, and creating a remote attendance application for local authorities was always part of that. But we just thought it was going to be quite an uphill job, particularly in getting it across places like America, which is where we're sort of targeting. So when this opportunity or this crisis really came, we saw that actually we needed to bring that forward quicker. So we had to work smarter and faster and move that forward. So when other opportunities came in, we didn't diverge from our plan, if you like. So if the opportunities could help us, I think that, was it somebody said, if it helped us to make the boat go faster, we would take on the opportunity, but only if it makes the boat go faster. And being distracted by, even though on a personal level, on an emotional level, of course, we've got the technology, and why would we not want to support people in a desperate situation wanting to attend a family member's funeral, that we could provide that service. But we very quickly evaluated that there are other services that could do it and probably do it a lot cheaper than us. And you can even do it on your mobile phone. So we realized that that would be a rabbit warren or a cul-de-sac for us. So we just stayed on task and listening to our existing customers, as has just been said, and actually finding out what are their pain points, what are their problems. So although Teams and Zoom are fantastic for us as a team in development, people are now going to want new tools. So many working practices are now going to change out of this. We don't quite know what the fallout is. We're just seeing the early part of that. So that's really how we filtered. It was actually just to stay as much as possible with our plan and only take things on if they made the boat go faster.
Right. Hayden, obviously you had this huge opportunity with the COVID diagnostic. That wouldn't have been on the horizon presumably a few months ago. Has that meant that you've had to rejig your focus as a business overall, or have you absorbed that within the overall growth plan?
We were able to sort of realign some of our capacity. We have a fantastic facility here where we have always had additional headroom in terms of manufacturing. And we're not at the moment manufacturing the whole product, we're manufacturing just a subcomponent of it, a very important component. And we've been able to sort of adjust production schedules accordingly to ensure that we have plenty of existing stock of our other products on the shelf and in the supply chain, but we're able to move to manufacture this particular component for our partner company.
Great. Do you want me to kick off with? We've got the questions are absolutely flying in. So shall I just pick one, Jamie, and then we'll
go for it. Yeah.
So Daniel, you said you suspect working practice won't return to normal. Indeed, people are trying to fit these new technologies to old working practices. That's a challenge that you already mentioned. Are you or can you be business already prepare for what will be our new normal, or is it too early right now?
I think it's probably a little bit too early. I think we hope that we were making technology which is for the future, because we realized in order to compete in a market where you have got popular platforms, going for specific areas of work or domains was our way forward. And so what we're learning from this is our customers are now shouting louder than ever before about what they really need and what they really want. So if we actually just listen, we don't actually have to do anything anymore. We just need to listen. I mean, I'm getting phone calls. We provide services to people like Westminster, Birmingham, Croydon, Swansea, whatever, and they're calling us and they're saying, legislation has changed. We now want to do this. And is it possible that we can do this, this, and this? So I don't know, a practical explanation there would be, so Teams doesn't easily allow you to output a video and an audio from that stream, whereas Zoom does. So you've been able to live stream this onto YouTube. That's what councils are trying to bang their head against at the moment, or our clients, our customers. And so what we're doing is listening, where's their pain points and what are they trying to achieve? And then actually seeing if what we had designed was actually going to meet their full requirements. So we're just gathering knowledge. And I think that's the only thing you can do. And because it's software, we can iterate very, very quickly and turn a solution around and solve a problem very, very quickly. And that will actually turn into new products that we hadn't really intended. That will be the unintended consequence.
Yeah, great.
Okay. We're seeing a number of questions for Hayden coming in about testing. So we hear that certain types of testing are unreliable. This is from Paul James. Are the tests that you're involved in providing materials in this category?
Well, that's a hard question. I think the best way to answer that actually is that Novacyt yesterday put out a press release via, I think I saw it on LinkedIn, and looking at the efficacy of their test, and they compared it to the WHO standards, and that shows that it's a highly effective test, and I would refer people to Novacyt in that answer.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you talked about, both of you talked about, the challenges of migrating your staff to new working practices, and it's interesting, Hayden, you were talking about gin o'clock on a Friday and then moving Daniel to Slack. What have you found have been the most effective ways of keeping people together virtually? What sort of tools and techniques? Because I'm sure you've tried a few, and some will have been more effective than others.
Daniel, can I go first on this one? And I think you may have a different experience. And we have around about 80 staff in the UK, spread around a couple of sites. So we were always working on communication between sites. But I think what we found actually is the importance of those virtual coffee breaks, and recreating that sort of walking to the desk moment. Not everything needs to be done by an email. I think there's a great tendency, if you work remotely, just to fire off an email, whereas actually if you were in the office, you might walk across to somebody's desk and have a conversation with them. And we've tried to get the teams to very much follow that, where if there is you don't have to do everything by email, you can do it by picking up the phone, picking up a call through Teams or Zoom, we use quite a lot as well. And I think it's forcing that importance of person-to-person interaction where you can see somebody's face. And I think that's really, for me, has been a really important way that we've tried to keep people together.
Yeah. Well, similar. I think you're probably a bit more advanced than us, Hayden, in terms of Slack is really useful, but you know, what devices, like what time do you have Slack? So we deliberately have Slack at 9:30 in the morning, and because it's a very strict sort of process, people are saying what they've worked on, what they're going to work on. As in terms of managing people's workflow, you're able to very quickly get a good sense of what that is. But that doesn't stop me also from picking up the phone and talking to people on a one-to-one, or having a separate Zoom meeting with 2 or 3 members of the team. I guess the thing that I miss is the culture of Civico is that we hope we're a very caring organization. So being able to pick up on somebody who's not doing so well, or somebody who's struggling, and can you put them together with somebody who can just take them through that? That's not so easy to do with these online tools. But I guess if we use them more, our ears will just get more attuned to when we notice that somebody's not well or somebody's not happy about something. And also I've noticed that, you know, with our team is that sometimes you get conflicts which it's hard to manage over an online platform. So if people get into a heated discussion about a particular way of doing something, normally what you would do is, you know, one person's going to get a cup of tea, the other person's going to get a stern talking to, or whatever needs to happen. You simply can't do that when we're all self-isolating and working through remote tools. But I do like the idea of gin Friday and gin Thursday. That sounds good. Or did you say coffee? I think you said coffee, didn't you?
There's a few coming in that are around a similar theme. So we've got some questions here from Joe, Eugenia and Catherine. And it's, do you envisage maintaining flexible working after this period has ended? And how do you plan to re-establish your full-time workforce in your spaces once we do get back to normal?
If I would just very quickly say, because I've noticed that I'm amazed. Our teams seem to work better. Some work better, some not so. But actually, I've seen no reduction in productivity at all. So I haven't yet filtered all of this through my own head, but it's given me an experiment that I wasn't expecting. And I can see that actually we'll have to question our existing practice as to how we do this in the future.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Daniel. I think the return or the normal will be a different normal. The world will have moved on. I think that I like your choice of expression, Daniel, about the experiment. I think the experiment that has been run certainly has given some really some interesting outputs around how often people need to be in the office, and those of you that have lived or work in Manchester will know that the commute anywhere is horrendous. I have team members who live probably 5 or 6 miles away, and if they drive in, it takes them an hour. That's an hour wasted of their day, and I think we'll see a lot of people change their working hours. There'll be flexibility in that. Maybe the rush hour will disappear. Maybe it'll be spread out a little bit more. I certainly think that there is a lovely buzz to have a full office and people working hard, and I miss that. I have to say, we have an amazing team camaraderie here and team spirit, and it is very quiet with the operational team in working on their projects. But I think as I said, the return to normal will be very different, but we will certainly improve the amount of working at home that's done, and I think we'll see a different set of core hours within the business.
I think just a final point for me would be, I guess I was always anxious that if people are working from home, are they actually working from home? Are they watching the television and doing the laundry? And I imagine they're doing all of those things. But if the work is being done, if the productivity is there, and people are managing their workspace and they're honourable, and I think that's what it comes down to is, you know, as a manager or an employer, if you're employing somebody, you want something for that. And if people are honouring that, and in my experience, actually, in most cases more, perhaps one or two people it really doesn't suit, but the majority it does suit. But so it's given me confidence to actually embrace this remote working even more. So some companies, for example, have a policy where they have at least one day that they work from home anyway. And that's standard in many companies, standard practice. I now would have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. And I guess that may increase to 2 days, and that the employee can have the flexibility to say, well, I need 2 days to be working from home this week rather than one. And again, I think providing the work gets done, that's something I've learned out of this process.
I agree. I think there's been a stigma, hasn't there?
Mm.
Sorry, Jamie.
A few questions coming in really on a similar theme around really coping with demand. So if this, I think particularly Hayden, but I'm sure it applies to Daniel as well. As you start to ramp up your production, what sort of challenges do you foresee, and what are the sort of, you know, the ceilings and the breaks that you envisage, and how much can you ramp up, and what time frame?
So those are all good, and I'd imagine very natural questions from people who are interested in what we do here, especially around you know, the deal that we have done with Novacyt. Without wishing to age too many people in our organization, there is hundreds of years of experience, collective experience in running manufacturing businesses, from Hologic to GenPro to IDS to BBI to Urban Mannheim, some really big blue chips in there. We're able to bring that experience to bear on such situations like this. And we have a very robust production planning process. We understand how to scale things. This is not our first time as people within the organization of meeting an increased demand for testing for particular diseases. Whilst this is a particularly new approach and a new disease, the same problems would exist in supply chains and manufacturing capacity in all sorts of organizations. But we're very well prepared to deal with that because of that experience that we were able to bring to bear on a light-hearted note, with everybody locked in for 3 months. I'm hoping for a baby boom as we do prenatal testing. So you know, we need to prepare for that ramp up in demand as well.
Yeah, so we've changed our some of our practice for that. So we've realised that the scale for us, so all councils need what we do, and whereas before we were just serving something like 15% of the market, now 100%, and they simply can't get the product that we've got from anywhere else. So we're literally being inundated. So we very quickly had to create an online system to deliver the tools, not just actually having the products, but how are we delivering that to the customer? Then connecting that with VPN, so our engineers can work with their engineers on site without physically having to drive and physically be there. So those practices are changing, not just the products that we create, but how do we deliver those products, and how do we maintain and service those products? So we've had to gear up. So on the 1st of May, most councils around the UK are looking to start their meetings again, and the technology has to be in place. It has to be tested rigorously for them, and then they need to go. And it's council meetings are not a trivial activity. That there's a certain amount of gravitas with a council meeting. So the tech's got to work, and how do we do that at a scale is something that we've had to really think through. If anything, that has been part of our challenge. But if we do it for this one particular product, it means the other areas that we're working in, we can utilize that same productivity. But also we're educating our customers that they don't need somebody from Birmingham to get into a car and drive all the way down to Llandudno or Devon in order to fix something, which we can now do through VPN. So I've had lots of meetings with council officers who would otherwise prefer, because they would consider themselves, their words not mine, old school, that they would expect to have a real meeting. Well, now they're very comfortable about having virtual meetings. So the amount of my time I'm going to get back from that, and the amount of scaling up that we can do by utilizing simple things like Team Viewer or GoToMeeting or whatever it would be, is amazing. And so the customer is actually changing their mindset, and their expectations and their literacy, online literacy, is completely changing. And that's just in a matter of weeks.
Interesting. So I think as you've grappled with these great opportunities that have hit you through the crisis, how have you found you've changed the positioning of your business? Because obviously you're wanting to make the most of these opportunities, but at the same time not be seen to be exploiting the crisis. And there's a very fine line there in terms of how you go to market. And it'd be great to get your thoughts on how you've approached that.
Well, so for us,
Hayden, do you want to kick off?
Oh, go. No, Daniel was answering, so I was still thinking.
Daniel, you're in.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, okay, sorry. We're very mindful that our customers are going to be with us for years and years to come, we would hope, and they're in trouble. Our customers are in trouble. They need a certain thing and they need it fast. And what they don't need is a smart ass company to milk the opportunity and extract whatever. So no, we're using this opportunity as a relationship builder as well. So their procurement, for example, is very long-winded. So we've said, look, let's just get the technology in, let's get it up and running. Yes, of course, it will need to be paid for, and we'll work that out, but we'll do that with integrity. And I've not seen any issues. I've given them an indicator. So for example, in us, what people pay for Zoom and what they pay for Teams is roughly going to be comparable. And on that understanding, we've gone ahead, and then people have given us their goodwill, and they'll look for it. So there are some things that I'm perhaps not able to say, but there are some requirements of our company to cater for emergency situations that may take place. And so we've joined various teams to be part of an emergency planning for things that could happen. And we've not charged for those those commitments. Hopefully they'll never get called on. But our customers will remember those things. And actually, in a crisis, as a company, we're human beings as well, which is, of course, somebody's in trouble, we want to help. If they're our customers, we want to help. And they understand that we're a commercial business, but we're also, we're in a partnership. It's not just a transactional, it's also about, the people we work with.
Yeah, okay. Hayden.
I think I'll go back to my opening statement, is that we are a molecular diagnostic company that sells into over 60 global territories around the world, and we supply tests that are vitally important to mums and others in that network. And people are still going to become pregnant. There's still going to be people who develop cystic fibrosis as a disease. There are going to be people. We launched an oncology testing product 6 months ago. People are still going to fall ill with that. So we have to maintain everything we do with integrity. We still have to be able to serve those customers. And what we've tried to do is to understand where that global demand is for the COVID testing. That's why we have offered to our customers to back them up, as when instead of their labs having to run the testing, we can do that if they become sort of overwhelmed through illness or through demand of COVID testing. We saw an opportunity to support the NHS by opening our laboratories up to provide that testing, and we'll do the same out of our Type A facility for the health network there. And we worked with our partner in terms of manufacturing product because there is such a demand for it. So what we've done is, I think, trying to operate with a high level of integrity and see where we need to be, because those labs, just as Daniel was saying with his customers, they're going to be there after this. If we went and price gouged now, or we did something that was seen to be unhelpful, then they're going to remember that. But likewise, they're also going to remember the fact that we have done everything we can to continue to support them. We've made all our tech support remote. We have a high level of contact with our customers to see what else it is that we can do to support them. How do we keep them going in a time of unprecedented demand on the health service, ensuring that they've got product, that we've got stock. So we've taken, this is all goes back to that planning piece, that the piece of bringing our functional leads together, our senior people in our organization to plan for, to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And we get ourselves into position to continue to be able to supply into those markets.
Just to add a little suffix onto that, a very important question, I'm sure, that affects everybody listening. Hayden, with the world calling out for antibody testing, is it an area that you think you're likely to get into?
Well, this is a very technical question, and I will give a very high-level answer. Antibody testing, it tends to be done around a technology called ELISA. That is not the technology that we operate in. We are a molecular diagnostic company. We make PCR tests and we make genomic tests that run on NGS platforms. The antibody technology is a very different approach.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. We're rapidly approaching the end of the hour. I don't know, Steph, if there's any other questions you want to pull before I ask a final question.
No, so we've still got actually 12 questions left in the Q&A, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to cover them all. But what I thought we might do now is just share the poll answers and then just have a quick discussion around that to see, interestingly, what the participants on the call are finding, their biggest struggles, etc. So if I share this just now, hopefully you'll all be able to see the answers to that. Please just give me a nod if you can to reassure me.
Can't see those.
I don't see anything yet.
No.
There?
Nope.
Okay. Well, that's disappointing. Maybe the attendees can see. But just to give you a quick run through, most of our attendees are, interestingly, not in our SciTech regions. So we've got 9 participants from Manchester, 7 from Birmingham, 1 from Leeds, and actually 30 from other areas around the UK. Again, interestingly, the sectors in which they sit under, we've got 8 in the technology bracket, 4 in the sciences, 9 in the life sciences, 1 in public sector, 8 in professional services, and actually 17 in other. So it'd be interesting to find out what those others are, and if anybody of the attendees does wish to share their kind of answers with us, then obviously you can virtually raise your hand and we can come to you. Overwhelmingly, the third question, how much has your business been impacted by COVID-19? It's been impacted a lot, is the overriding answer there. Quite closely behind impacted a little, so everybody's getting some form of impact on some form of level. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, what positive impact has the change had on your business, if any? So top answer there is improved operational effectiveness. I think that kind of follows off what you were saying there, Daniel, which is good to hear that we're all on the same page, really. And then again, behind that, improved teams dynamics.
Alert from system UI server, low battery.
Oh, someone's on low battery, which finally we're coming to an end anyway. So, and then most people, just on that last question there, are planning up to 6 months ahead for how the COVID is going to impact on their business. Just a quick discussion maybe around that time frame and whether you'd like to share with us, your kind of contingency plan and how far in advance you're looking.
We're both on mute, actually.
There
we are.
Daniel, I'll let you answer first.
I guess one of the aspects of what is occurring for us is we're scaling at such a rate, we're going to need to, onboard people, look at investment and all those kind of things which one does when you get to a certain level. So investment is something that has not really come our way much at all. Whereas now, because what we've got relates worldwide and that there'll be a particular need for it, there's that opportunity. But it's just, so for me, I haven't yet got to the point of how are we going to scale this out on a grand scale, but that's how it's going to affect us. And we're going to need to do some serious planning around that. At the moment, it's create the product that meets the need. The secondary will be sales enablement and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, and so in terms of our sort of operational planning, we run a process called sales and operations planning, and that has two windows of vision. One is a very short term, the month ahead of us, in terms of what our shipping needs are, logistics and planning for that month. And then it runs at a 6 to 9 month window then in terms of manufacturing. And so we look out that far. So we're already building in to be able to manage that that sort of growth we anticipate across all our aspects of our business, and how it will how that will scale and how that will plan out. And it's something that we have learned from a number of us that worked at GenProbe, or Hologic as it was, as a process that they ran, and it served us very well because we were able to very easily adapt to the additional capacity demands that were put on us through our new partnership. And this sort of was very reminiscent of a time when Abbott dropped out of the HIV market in the US, and GenProbe had to pick up a great deal of additional capacity in HIV testing. And because we'd already gone through that experience, then we were able to deploy that here. And that's something that we've had in post since Lynn and I had joined the business a number of sort of 18 months and nearly 2 years ago for Lynn. So we had the systems in place to help us cope with that influx of demand.
Right.
So we're reaching the end, towards the end of our hour. So I think, Steph, I would love to thank you very much, to both of you, for joining us today. And the three sort of takeaways that I've taken from this very interesting discussion is firstly this concept of building the boat, nicely worded, Daniel, about how to manage the incoming opportunities as they come, and alongside what was the plan. The second one around this live experiment that we're all in, and it's very interesting to see how the poll results matched what both of you were saying, and I think what we've experienced internally in Bruntwood as well is how efficient this radical change in working practice has actually been, and as I think you both said, that a lot of these changes will endure a lot longer than the crisis, and we will learn a lot from this whole process. And then finally, this point around ramping up production and being able to scale smartly, and then potentially deploying a lot of this new working practice to allow organizations to scale better. So I think really just thank you very much to you both. I hope everybody has enjoyed this this session this afternoon. As Steph said, this is the start of a new format, and we hope to continue with more examples of organizations across the Bruntwood campuses that are pivoting and embracing opportunities as we go through this very tricky period. The next session we hope to set up in the next couple of weeks. We have everyone's email address, and if you don't want us to email you with details of the next one, please let us know, but otherwise we'll keep you in touch. And thank you again.
Thank you very much.
To Stephanie to say goodbye.
Yeah, just to echo that, thanks to both Daniel and Hayden. I know you're obviously both very busy right now, so for giving us that time this afternoon. I do hope that everybody who has attended has found it useful. I know I definitely have. And then just to note also that if you do want to get in touch with us, if you want to give us any feedback, if your question wasn't answered, then we'll be happy to pose that to Hayden and Daniel after the call, and we can get back to you. Please just do email myself there, Stephanie Einan at bruntwood.co.uk, or my colleague in Manchester, Stephanie Williams. We've kept our names the same just to keep it nice and easy for you to remember. And then Jamie's is there also if you do want to pick anything else up. But yeah, once again, I just wanted to thank you all for your time.
Thank you for inviting us. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
We'll see you on Tuesday the 21st, I believe, 2 weeks' time. Have a great Easter, everybody.
Thank you. Keep safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.